Hello everybody. Before you decide to click off because this video is very long, I just want to say that skip to this time to avoid me talking that's up on the screen right now, and go into the description and the comments to see when the timestamps are for each part of the manifesto. Anywho, skip to that time if you want to skip all this. Anywho, this is called the Reformative Socialist Manifesto. This document contains a hefty amount of reforms to the U.S. government and ideal ideas to add to other governments and their policies. This is a manifesto I've been working on since the beginning, since pretty much January 26 of 2018, and it's not perfect because I've had a dramatic shift in ideology since then. So right now I'm an anarchist, and that there's a few things I might want to add to the manifesto later on, but we'll get to that maybe later in the year, but we'll see. Anywho, I worked with this with my friend Zachary Thornton at school, and just let's get at it. Section 1. Government. Paragraph 1. Every province would have 100 elected representatives to form a larger House of Representatives. 150 to 200 workers from different companies or representatives from local councils within each province would be put together to form the Working People's Council. Real quick, provinces would be states, just so you know, in America. Depending on how the companies or councils would wish for the workers and citizens to be taken into power, they could decide to use elections or randomly choose. If they wish to not be a part of it, the next in line would take it. This would dissolve the Senate, and a third council would also be established called the Statesman Council. The governor from each province is put into this to be the final decision makers on a law to determine if it would be acceptable to their province and the whole nation. This, of course, would replace the president and vice president. When laws need to be passed for the nation, they need agreement of 65% in the House of Representatives and 70 to 75% of the workers' councils to be sent to the Statesman Council. There, at least 35 of the 50 governors would have to agree on the document to pass it as a law. A veto can be issued to where the U.S. population gets involved. If the law is very important, where 65% of the population must agree to the law for it to go into action. If the law fails to go through, it is abandoned and can be reopened in the 7 months afterwards. Governments in the provinces and their counties would be about the same. As for the Supreme Court, there would be 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 1 independent to keep court cases fair and not too political. Paragraph 2. Universal basic income will be enacted and only a living wage will be paid. People will be paid according to the size of their household. The more people in the household, the larger the income. People are also paid extra if special needs have to be fulfilled. A house payment is already paid before the income reaches the household. If someone buys a car, the payment of the car per each month is taken off of the basic income. Anything that is not basic will be taken off of the UBI because possible money problems could occur. This would keep incentives to work as well. Also, if someone is rich and already has plenty of money, they will get less or no basic income. If people wanted to get more money, they could go to work. More work will lead to higher pay for the day, less work will lead to lower pay, which is happening today, but more emphasis will be put on companies to act this way. Job payments that can't be based on effort would be based instead on the amount of time worked. This is how it works now, but with this, workers make the decision on how pay is distributed between one another. Of course, the money produced will be given to provide basic income, government projects, and company maintenance first, and then the people will be paid their wages. Healthcare would be free in the sense that healthcare is paid off before you get your basic income. Paragraph 3. Healthcare in a socialist system tends to be a top priority. Now much in the pre-existing healthcare systems of socialist countries is corrected and perfected. However, some improvements can still be made, such as more emphasis on the importance of healthcare providers, development of better treatments for the most devastating diseases, and more effective evacuation procedures to minimize losses of life in case of an emergency. Healthcare would be owned by the government, and basic healthcare would be provided for in the people's UBI. Sorry that I keep messing up when I'm talking. But multiple healthcare providers would exist under it. For example, say a healthcare provider provides a certain plan or service that the others don't that someone needs. A person could use that healthcare provider while still not having to pay much or at all. Since the government has all of those providers, jobs are created and people are provided free, custom healthcare services. More advanced healthcare procedures would have to be paid for, but cheaper than they are right now. Since it would cost a good amount of money for the government to provide free healthcare, the military budget would be cut and the extra money would shift towards it as well as UBI, and people with large incomes would be taxed about 60% of what they make each year with their income. After the health of the people has been ensured with free and effective health care as a right, we may now move on to more demanding projects for social stability. Paragraph 4. Illegal immigration. Illegal immigration on the Mexican border would be solved by any illegal immigrants that have gotten through to the U.S. to have 1 to 3 years to apply for citizenship. Since current immigration policy is flawed and immigration court is as well, that would have to be fixed before the citizenship idea would come into play. Immigrants that are caught crossing the border would be let off with a warning and sent back. The next time they cross, they would be arrested and put in jail for a day or two. If any immigrant is seeking asylum, the government must take them in and then seen later for the proof of their reasoning. As for illegal immigrants coming up from overseas, they would be kept in a decent living area until they can be sent back. Same would go for illegal immigrants crossing the Mexican-U.S. border. Paragraph 5. Gun management could be fixed to where everyone has to go through training in order to purchase a firearm unless they've already gone through training. The age requirement would be raised to 21 for any weapon. In order to purchase a semi-automatic rifle, shotgun, etc., training would be required as well as a 3 to 4 month waiting period to obtain it. As for getting handguns, a 2 to 3 month waiting period would be implemented. Handguns would also be allowed in the cars of citizens, while teachers in school would be allowed to have them on their person or in close proximity to them, depending on the student-to-teacher ratio. A few teachers would be required to have a concealed carry permit and special training to be allowed a handgun. As for workers, depending on the workplace environment and location, to police stations and emergency services, workers would be allowed to carry handguns to work and/or there would be state-issued security guards to the workplaces. Of course, workers could have guns in their vehicles, but depending on the workplace's location, the workers could bring them inside. Paragraph 6. Education is also a pressing matter. First of all, public colleges would be free to attend. All youth would be graded on each 9 weeks of school, and standardized tests would be either reformed to mean more or be final tests that wouldn't mean too much. I can get more into that in another video, but today's not the day for that. Schools would also focus on more project-based learning instead of tests and quizzes. Schools could be renovated to better suit the needs of the teachers and students for a better learning environment. The Pledge of Allegiance would no longer be a factor in schools, as it would be replaced or remove the mention of God. As for college, university education, public colleges would be free to attend, while private universities and colleges would still be funded by donations and tuitions from other people, but they would have to limit how much money tuitions would cost. This will be determined by the national government, and if states want to make it cheaper, they will be able to do so. Paragraph 7. Foreign affairs, or foreign policy, will take America out of NATO and will join BRICS. Doing this is more beneficial because of the focus of the economic and social development in that agreement. If a country is attacked by an enemy, America would only get involved if it would hurt the economy of that country, or it is very difficult to handle. If a war starts in any country that isn't part of BRICS, America would only join if the country is weak, no other country will help, or a sizable amount of resources belong there that they would need to survive. War declared on the U.S. will require an investment of about 50% of the military on the field and 50% in defense. Paragraph 8. Jobs can be brought in or back by limiting the amount of outsourcing to different countries companies can do. Companies that outsource too much would not be allowed to sell in the U.S. or face many taxes. When a company owns a sizable amount of stock in the stock market or is dominating it, the company is no longer allowed to purchase other companies to make theirs stronger and bigger. The only way that they could purchase more companies would be to have those other companies catch up and lower the bigger company's market share. Cooperative businesses would also be heavily encouraged and supplied. Companies with shareholders that do not contribute work will have economic consequences if they try to change the ideas of the business they own shares in. Companies would have inspections 3 times a year for each company building in each province to help with environmental protection. Paragraph 9. The stock market is a major part of the world. With new reforms and careful precision to change, the government would take most of its investment into the markets out, so if anything happens to them, nothing major would happen to the economy or infrastructure. When stocks grow, companies within those succeeding stocks will have to increase payment to workers, whether it be a few cents or dollars. Since the current government has a major investment into the stock market, they will help out big failing companies that they are with. With few changes, that will become illegal. The new government would not be allowed to help out big businesses that were failing, and instead, they would help out smaller businesses to take their place of those bigger, failing businesses. If the company that is falling are a great help in the medical field, food business, or are humanitarian-like, they will get funding for their companies to stay running. Paragraph 10. Farming businesses would be given the choice to function independently or join a state-owned cooperative. Farms that choose to join the cooperatives would give food to the state to be given to state-owned stores. The farms that don't join the cooperative would give their food to independently owned stores that are in their area. The stores would also have the option in being independently owned or state-owned. Stores that choose to work for the state would have their materials provided by the state's cooperatives and other businesses. They would provide what the state supplies them with according to what the people generally need. The stores that choose to be independent would get their materials provided by local businesses in their areas. They would provide whatever they want to or what the people in their area want them to. Finally, for the businesses that provide to the stores, they can have their own businesses to give to the state-owned stores or the independent stores. Ones that provide state-owned stores would get help from the state to get their materials. The ones that provide to independently owned stores would get their materials for themselves. Whenever an independent store farm isn't doing too good on money, they would have the choice to either get a loan from the state or become state-owned, or fail if they want to. Either way, they still function on the way that they wish to. This system would intend to create a more efficient supply and demand economy, and for corporate farms, they would be shut down or government controlled. They would be made more open to make sure that the animals are treated as humanely as possible. Paragraph 11. Food quality is an important subject to look at. To make sure that people are eating safe foods and drinks, farms and food producing companies would be checked more often than most companies. Of course, those other companies would still be checked more often than they already are, but farms and food companies would need those checkups more because food and drinks have to be safe. If need be, the government will shut down farms and food producing companies if the food is not safe or is violating environmental and animal safety laws. Farming factories will be shut down over time or reformed, but the first option would be most likely the answer. Food and drinks produced in the foreign countries would be heavily checked before they would be available in stores and even in prisons. Paragraph 12. Infrastructure would be invested in heavily. Roads, bridges, tunnels, dams, and other types of infrastructure would have more routine checkups to make sure that everything is up to standards. Every province is issued a minimum of 80 inspectors, and then more issued depending on the amount of infrastructure in the province. Paragraph 13. The housing of people will be free in the sense that it will be already paid for in the family's UBI, which would be affected by the price, in order to keep a consistency with most of the social systems already present. Since there is a shortage of decent housing in the United States as it is, more housing could be provided for those who are without a shelter. Abandoned mansions or houses owned by someone that doesn't intend to use them will be turned into apartments, lodgings, or available land that anyone will be allowed to come in. Since housing would be argued over, a special court would be established to decide the legitimacy of ownership of structures and houses. Paragraph 14. As for space exploration, it would still be happening, but funding for government space exploration would be reduced a bit. Private space exploration companies would not be changed because they are still funded without the government's help. A single conglomerate of space exploration agencies would proceed with public space exploration to advance knowledge of space. These public government-funded programs would have a bit of an increase of funding from 0.5% of government funding to 1.5% to have more researching abilities while still making it not too significant. The private exploration companies would be unaffected by public exploration, but they may work together to achieve a common goal. If the ISS needs to be replaced, the people would be asked. Since space exploration would cost a good bit of money to continue, America would work with other countries to produce technology and equipment to go further into space exploration. Paragraph 15. The atmosphere and parts of land are currently deteriorating, so it is very important to preserve what is left of our environment. This means that factories and businesses would be regularly expected to ensure as little environmental damage as possible. Cleaner and more efficient energy sources would be sought to prevent further global warming. Current clean energy sources such as wind, solar, nuclear, and geothermal would be expanded and made more effective. Since it would take a while to transfer to mostly clean energy, buildings would switch to clean energy sources over time. The government would also ensure that national parks would be preserved as much as possible. Paragraph 16. On the subject of drugs, marijuana would be legalized for recreational use when someone is at least 26, and cigarettes would also have an age requirement of 26 years old, seeing as it is the age that the human mind is fully developed. The same would also be applied to e-cigarettes and snuff pouches. Drugs such as cocaine, meth, and other ones like that would stay illegal. As for prescription drugs, every state would have their own requirements and laws for each type. The local government would have a little bit more power because local governments usually know their communities better than the state and national government. The national government would have some legal authority over a lot of prescription drugs, but the states would have the most power. The reason why is because the states have different budgets and ways to deal with the prescription drugs. Paragraph 17. Prisons would start to be reformed as rehabilitation centers, rather than keeping people locked up. Prisons would, in fact, not be oriented towards punishment to keep their humanity and not punish people for unjust reasons. Crimes committed by anyone due to a mental issue will be treated with rehabilitation. Crimes committed by anyone because of out-of-control anger or satisfaction will be given rehabilitation and punishment. They will be guarded less so the prisoners could feel less intimidated by armed presence, but would have heavy surveillance. Facilities could be rearranged for rehabilitory purposes. Cells would remain for unstable prisoners. The guards that are present shall be equipped with handguns and tasers in case of violence, as well as light body armor under their outfits. The death penalty would be given to anyone who murders, seriously injures, or does anything like that to someone. Of course, if it was self-defense, then they wouldn't be charged with much or with anything at all. However, these people will have other opportunities to have a just life in prison, with or without parole. Every court case would vary depending on state and local laws, and even if guilt is seen thoroughly within the convicted criminals. Paragraph 18. When it comes to public transportation, it will be freely open to all who require it. Transportation routes would be optimized to ensure that as many citizens as possible could access them. Buses, subways, automated vehicles, and trains would become standard modes of public transportation. With optimized transportation, all provinces would be working at maximum efficiency. Thus, transportation would require a decent amount of government funding, but that would be compensated for with the enhanced production rates. Paragraph 19. When it comes to the police, people have major trust issues and lack of respect for them. In order to have the police trusted and seen as good people, mandatory checks would be performed at every local police station that would check their background history and what they've done so far as police officers. This process will take place every 2 or 3 years to make sure that that are working for the police station are unbiased and trustworthy with the people in the area that they are working in. If a community would wish to, they can be gifted a militia or allowed to set up their own. Of course, this would pretty much be the same as police, but they would be watched closer. However, the community could decide which laws a community would follow. And if a community would wish to go further, they can have a neighborhood watch. They too would be watched, but could select fewer laws to follow. Certain laws on murder, sexual assault, and other important laws such as those would have to stay, and depending on the degree of said crimes, state police could get involved. Paragraph 20. The military is a huge part of how the U.S. functions. Even though it is good to have a strong military, there are many flaws with it. The first problem is that too much funding is put into the military when we don't need to fight so much. The military budget would be cut down around 20 to 25% of the overall government budget. Like it has been proposed in before paragraphs, half the military would be put into defending and the other half would be put into action. Of course, this may change depending on the current global political climate. Paragraph 21. In the case of a national emergency, the government would task citizens from all neighboring provinces to respond to the situation. The army would be sent to where there is physical threat to the people. Everyone is expected to help out in any way possible. If there is destruction to infrastructure, the government would send resources to the affected area to be distributed for aid in rebuilding. Paragraph 22. Fiat money is the greatest threat facing both the economy of the U.S. and the global economy. For the last 50 years, bankers and federal officials have been able to create new money from nothing, leading to extreme inflation. Major corporations benefit by being the first ones to receive this new money. In turn, they buy assets, property, goods, services, etc. before the effects of the inflation take place, making it cheaper on them and more expensive on the people later on. The dollar will instead of a fixed value that can go $1 up or down. Section 2. Companies, corporations, businesses. Paragraph 1. Companies would have to be changed a bit in their management. Cooperatives would be left alone from the government with the exception of inspections. Bigger and non-cooperative governments would have tests conducted to see if their workers enjoy working at those businesses. If a certain amount of workers from the companies are okay with working there, the companies would stay the way they are unless they violate the law. If the workers are not okay with working at the companies would become state-owned or dismantled unless reforms are made within them. Paragraph 2. In the socialist system, jobs would practically be guaranteed for anybody that wants one. If someone ever wanted to get a job for extra money, help society, or have something to do, a job would be guaranteed if they have the right requirements. An employer would not be allowed to reject an employee unless they do not fit the requirements, space, or other similar factors. Those factors would be looked at if a rejected employee requests it or an inspector shows up to look at the company's statistics. Jobs that nobody likes to do or finds terrible to work in would have increased pay and better working conditions to make it reasonable to work those jobs. If no one could be found, the government would go ahead and attempt to find them a government job. Paragraph 3. Internet providers would all be owned by the government to ensure that nobody would be exploited or incorporated into long-term contracts. The government would make it to where anyone who wanted to have an internet connection would be allowed to have it if there is a way to connect internet to the area that need connection. In order to pay for internet for someone and funding towards wire access to the internet across the nation, a small amount of income will be taken out of the UBI of people that have a connection to the internet. For the people that want internet, they could pay with a little bit of their UBI. Paragraph 2. Automation would be implemented over the course of time at a slow pace to make sure people can get any extra money if they need it from jobs. Jobs will be automated as much as possible. A few jobs will have to be unautomated, such as corporate farming. The methods used may be efficient but are cruel and inhumane. Instead, farming would be done on pastures and actual farms and rather than in factories. Companies that are pre-automated would function the way that they normally do, except more inspections would take place. The companies that can't be automated as much or require more hands-on labor would get a little more leeway for taxes and payments to ensure that they get what they want, what they need to function and keep jobs open to people. Paragraph 5. As for ways to innovate, companies that do not contribute products for human needs, such as food and transportation, will receive little to no funding in any endeavor, while products that do not contribute to help society will receive extra funding. Paragraph 6. To help the workers that have been mistreated and exploited and reprimand the companies that have done the mistreating, new policies would be implemented to prevent future mistreatment and exploitation, along with it making it easier to charge bosses, CEOs, higher-ups, and other management-type workers for committing acts of mistreatment and exploitation. Unions would be easier to form and get support from their local and state governments as well as the national government. Section 3. Miscellaneous. Paragraph 1. Entertainers in the media and sports are paid huge amounts of money that could be used to help out people that need it more, so entertainers would only be paid a limit of $5 million. If that number goes 50,000 over that margin, the companies paying them will get a hefty fine of $500,000. Of course, this can be fixed to go lower depending on other ideas. Anywho, paragraph 2. A few companies will be removed or immediately begin to be state or cooperative controlled to be sure that they are going according to the new policies of the government. Walmart, Target, and other stores that have food sections would stay under the control of a cooperative, while the food sections of supercenters would be under state control to ensure that they are priced fairly and safe. Supermarkets would be controlled mostly by the state as they are mainly food-centered. As said in the farming paragraph 10, farms would be either state-controlled or independently owned. Paragraph 3. As for Amazon, at least in the USA, they would be shut down immediately and would start to become better functioning United States Postal Service, USPS. The people working in the old USPS would be incorporated into the new USPS. People that once worked for Amazon would also be incorporated into the new USPS. As for other Amazon workers around the world, the U.S. government would work with other countries to incorporate the old workers into new businesses and possibly keep the rest of Amazon under new management. Paragraph 4. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and the Walton family that control Walmart are major problems to the workers of their companies and the country. They would be prosecuted under the reasons that their workers are being exploited and mistreated, and that money that they could finance the American people. Jeff Bezos' money alone could provide a substantial amount of funding for his workers and the American people. Elon Musk's Tesla would stay, but it would either have new management or be run by the government. Of course, he can keep doing what he does for SpaceX. The Walton family would no longer be the owners of Walmart and its other establishments and would be made into a cooperative. Paragraph 5. Monsanto and other agrochemical manufacturing companies will become state-owned due to how they treat farmers that use their products and to reduce the risk of people being hurt by the chemicals they produce. Along with the government owning these companies, funding for science on agriculture would increase so that pesticides would be used less frequently and better ways to manage crops and farm animals could be developed. This research would be made to help people develop resistance to superbugs and make it to where people wouldn't be exposed to too many antibiotics, making ones that would need to be taken if needed utterly useless. Section 4. This Manifesto. The ideals of this manifesto were based off of democratic, socialist, Marxist, syndicalist, communist, and anarchist ideals. The anarchist part was more towards the police, but in the other manifesto I am making, that's where it'll all be addressed. Anywho, capitalism is an evil that we as a people must overcome. If you truly wish for a better future for the world's people and its workers, then make it be known with these ideals. All ideals are subject to change as new issues arise, as I said with the anarchist thing. Solidarity, comrades. Now that I'm done with this, remember, if you want to debate me in the comments or ask any questions, you can feel free to do so in the comments. Since you made it this far, I should let you know that if you want separate parts of this manifesto, I will have it uploaded onto either my other channel or in a playlist also contain this in those videos. So anywho, hopefully you enjoyed, everybody. Hopefully this inspired you in some way. Hopefully this triggered something in your mind to make you think. But anywho, this is the beginning of a new year, beginning of the new channel. So there's going to be more socialist, political, economic videos on the way every other Saturday. So just stay tuned. Solidarity, comrades.